I'm Anna, the Yarn Randomizer, and this is episode, I believe 29, yes, 29 of the Yarn Randomizer, and it is the 27th of July today. And this is a knitting podcast for the vast majority, just a knitting podcast, just going over all my stuff that I'm doing, that I'm making, that I'm planning, and that kind of thing. So if you're a returning viewer, welcome back, and welcome to anybody stumbling across this for the first time. I hope you enjoy the podcast and find something interesting here. And then, let's see, getting these preliminaries out of the way, and you'll notice I look over there because I have my notes on my big computer over here. And then contact information on Instagram. I'm original.annasender on Instagram. And on Ravelry, I am the Yarn Randomizer. You can find me there that way. I also am the Yarn Randomizer at gmail.com. And I have a P.O. box down below. I use that as my return address when I mail things out. And I also have set up a spreadshirt shop with a few shirts. And so as an example, I finally made a stash first, ask questions later shirt. Which is one of my favorite things to say. I joked about this before. It's always yarn first for me. I always find a yarn I love and then figure out what to do with it. And then why randomizer, really quick, is I choose my projects. I have all my yarns in my stash identified by a number, and I have this chip bucket full of numbers because I have a computer science and mathematics background, and I know that randomly generated picks on computer are not truly random. So my preference is to actually use physical chips. But so I think that's all the front stuff out of the way. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this, and now we'll go forward with it. We'll get right to it. Now, one of my favorite things to get right to is when I have a giveaway that I talked about last time. And I would say on average, I have a giveaway maybe every other episode, roughly. But basically I had one I had to do last time because of how I manage my stash. Now, I got in some yarn and I had to kind of destash about 900 yards of yarn. And in this case, it was this Madeline Tosh Impressions, their mohair silk, which is some beautiful called, this colorway is called Modern Fair Isle. And the person whose comment was randomly picked was Lisa Kingston Coleman. I get that right, 2059. So if that's you, get in touch with me via my Gmail address and we'll figure out how to get this to you and everything. So yeah, so that's done with. I won't make you wait till the end of the episode for that. Okay, finally now, the big thing that's in the room, what I'm wearing, is my Anate, and I am so happy with it. And I'm so happy with how it turned out. I'll put in a blocked picture of it. But yeah, I had 5 50-gram skeins of yarn that were a set that went with that were supposed to be a shawl kit. But I decided I thought I would be able to get a sweater out of basically 250 grams of fingering. And so I decided to try the Anate, which is a very nice kind of structured, simple t-shirt. It has this very pronounced, if you can see this line, the shoulder, it's basically got these shoulders here where they're doing these increases to create a very pronounced line. And then they shift that to create this pronounced line, creating the sleeve. Now, what I did that was a little different was, since I was using 5 skeins of yarn, instead of just color blocking it, I decided to do these areas where I helical knit one color to the next. That was how I shifted the colors. And then let me show you the rest of it all the way down to, if I can get this all the way up here. And so, and you can see it on the sleeves. I actually did longer ribbing everywhere than called for in the pattern. At first, because I misread the pattern. I think it said 1.5 centimeters and I just did it as inches. But even after that, when I realized that with the sleeves, I went ahead and made it longer everywhere because I wanted it a little longer. It's actually just this length at the bottom. But yeah, I think it turned out great. And I think it looks good and it fits like with just enough ease to look really good. And I know as I was making it, there was a little puckering here along these lines, but that seems to have completely blocked out. And I think it looks fantastic. I love it. This has got to be one of my favorite sweaters that I've knit. And I will definitely do this pattern again and stuff, but because I did like the construction and the way it was made. It's a very, very nice, simple, but also kind of classic look to it. So yeah, so I highly recommend the pattern, and it's just such a fun make, and it was such a fun way to combine these yarns. And I did want to show I really got good behavior in my variegated yarn here, using the helical knitting technique as well. I was wanting to avoid big pronounced streaks and pooling, and by combining the yarn with itself from opposite ends and then doing the helical knitting so it was alternating rows, I think it really worked. And on a fixed set of stitches too, you can get all kinds of weird behavior. If you're like, if you've ever seen people make yokes with variegated yarn, you can often get really shifting odd behavior where the number of stitches are changing every row. So I wanted a stable area, helical, opposite ends, so the colors were shifting the opposite direction, and I think it worked out great. So I think that was all the things I had to say about this. I love how it fits. So yeah, I'll be definitely wearing this a lot. And it's not too hot for it either. It's a nice little short sleeve fingering weight sweater, and it's sort of perfect for kind of light, you know, obviously not in the 90s in the summer, but on cooler days, this is perfect. So yeah, so not to brag too much, but I just love how it turned out. All right, so that is what I'm wearing, and it's my first finished object. And then the next thing is I have another finished object, but I wanted to show you these kind of in the raw. Now I know folks have seen plenty of things where I haven't finished in all the ends. I would have finished these in, but I decided to keep it this way because this one I'll get these finished in tomorrow, and I'll probably be giving these to my husband. We wear almost the same size shoe, which is a little embarrassing for me since I wear women's size 11 and he wears, I think, men's size, is he? I'm trying to remember. Our shoe size is only a little bit apart. His foot's shaped a little differently than mine, but yeah, as far as the actual size, we're not too far apart. All right, I'm thinking about one time when he accidentally started putting on my motorcycle boots when we were somewhere, and he said, "There's something wrong with my foot. It's like it's swollen," and I looked and I realized our boots are identical, and so he was accidentally putting on mine. So it was a little larger feet than mine, but not much. Okay, so here are my Curio socks by Andrea Mowry. And at the suggestion of a viewer, I had an unusual situation in which the Andrea Mowry's pattern usually has you use the dyed in the wool. I used a different sport weight that kind of changed in its color over the skein, but it was funny because it was all one color and then quickly transitioned to another color, and it didn't kind of go back and forth. So I ended up using the green part of it for the main part of the sock with some Anzula Nebula, and it was this white Anzula Nebula Au Naturel that had been picked by the Yarn Randomizer. I think that was Yarn Randomizer Project 16 for this year. And so I decided thought I had enough of this to do the sock with the toes and everything else. Now, somebody watching had suggested that I use the purple for the toes and such, and it's a good thing because it turns out I didn't have as much of the Au Naturel as I thought I did. And so I had just enough to make, here you get to see this, I made the 2 socks, and I'll show you exactly how much I had left. This was how much I had left. So obviously this was not going to make toes, heels, and cuffs. And when I went back and looked, I did figure out what happened was normally when I calculate the amount of yarn left over when it's used, I'll weigh what's left and subtract that from 100 grams, and that'll be my estimation about how much is left. Well, in Ravelry, as it turns out, Anzula Nebula has a larger, it is not a 100 gram skein, and I missed that. And so when I put in its amount that I did in a shawl, I didn't get the right amount included in that shawl. And so Anzula Nebula actually has, let's see if I can find it here, 114 grams per skein. So I was 14 grams off. So I'm going to turn on my ceiling fan really quick. There we go. Okay. Getting a little warm in here. Sweater. So I was 14 grams off. So it thought I had 14 grams more than I really did, which is why I thought I could make, with that extra 14 grams, there's a chance I'd have enough for these socks. But no, I only had, and I think I've got it estimated in the pattern now, based on the weights of everything, I only had about 27 grams of the Anzula Nebula, or in this case, 94 yards, way less than the requirement for the main color in these socks. So thank you, viewer who recommended using the purple, because you saved me on these socks. And so I did use the purple for the toes and for the cuffs. And I did make the cuffs the length that's called for. They call for 2 inches. That's a bit longer than I usually do. But as it turns out, doing that full 2 inches limited what I could do with the heels. So what I did was I took what there was left of the purple, started the heels with that, and then finished them up with the green. Now I don't know, I haven't blocked these socks because I did want to show you something on them. And I don't know if I have a sock blocker hiding around here somewhere. I don't see it. Ah, there's one. Just a minute. Here we go. These are the sock blockers I typically use. Now this sock is a little bit, this is a large, and I have a few of these, but I have a set of extra large blockers that work better on some of the socks that I make. And so this will be a little loose on here. But let's see, helps to get it on the right way. I wanted to show you the whole sock and how it looks. Okay, and then point something out. All right, there we go. Okay, so there it is. I'm pretty happy with it. I like how it turned out. It was a fun way to use up an oddball skein and some leftover fingering. Now, I don't often do an afterthought heel like this. I typically like either a heel flap and gusset or a what's called a Flegel heel. And I almost always do socks toe up. That's just my preference. I like it because it gives me a lot of flexibility. I can make the foot the size I need, and then I can do whatever I want on the cuff and stuff. Make it as long as I want, short as I want, and that kind of thing. Now, the interesting thing on Andrew Mowry's pattern, let me get set up here, is that on her pattern, the toes, heels, and cuff are typically this main color here, which you see in these slip stitches. And I actually did 4 rounds here and 4 rounds here to kind of bring out that color as well. And that's, she calls for that in the pattern here, but also the whole toe was supposed to be white. But I did add that up here to kind of mirror that. But the interesting thing is, you see here is the way the heel comes out. This heel normally would have been the white, and I think it would have blended into this kind of 2-stitch kind of raised cord of this white much better if it had been the white. So with the little bit that I have, I am going to kind of stitch over and make a chain of the white stitches over that edge of the heel. It's it's, and I think that'll tidy it up quite a bit. But yeah, otherwise, I'm really happy with these. They were kind of fun to knit. And I can see how if you were using one that actually changed color through the skein, it would be even more interesting. But yeah, and that kind of shows you that sometimes the way the skein looks rolled kind of, well, let's put it this way. Let's drag this one up here. Sometimes the way the skein looks when it's like this doesn't tell the full story of what's going on in the skein. So lesson learned there. But yeah, I'm really happy with these. I think they came out well. I think they may end up going to my husband, but I'm going to weave in the ends and block them this week and get a good picture of them up for my project on Ravelry. And if I didn't mention it, everything going on here that I'm knitting and stuff, everything's on Ravelry. My entire stash, all my projects, going back to when I first stumbled across Ravelry. The only thing I added beyond my knitting from when I joined Ravelry, which was in 2015, is that I put in, there is a project in there for my youngest son's christening gown, just because I still have it and I put it in there. And it's just a little bragging point. I knit him this big lace christening gown back in 2000, sorry, not even, oh, what am I saying? 1999. All right, so yep, so that's my second finished object, are these Curio socks, and I do recommend the pattern. It was a really nice pattern to work, and I am a toe-up sock person, so I'm just trying to think, would I recommend it for your first toe-up sock? Maybe. It wasn't difficult or anything. I think personally, I think a heel flap and gusset are a real good experience on your first toe-up sock, because the thing that I really like about a heel flap and gusset on a toe-up sock is you don't have to pick up any stitches. And that is part of why I don't like cuff down heel flap and gusset socks, is I don't like picking up the stitches along the edge of the heel flap. And so that's a personal preference. Saying anybody who enjoys doing that, more power to you. But I'm a lazy bum, and I like doing them toe up and not having to pick up any stitches. So, all right, so that's that. And then let's see, the next thing would be works in progress. And I've been a bum. It's hot summer and there's been a lot going on. But so my husband's motorcycle sweater I am going to finish the sleeve for next time, promise. And I have a shawl that's still kind of waiting for my attention here that I do intend to get to. And then, let's see, I have a couple of hibernating blankets that get worked on as their yarns come up through the Yarn Randomizer. But other than that, I only have a few whips in progress. Actually, in my Ravelry page, I think I only have five active whips. So one of them's the motorcycle sweater, and the shawl, it's the Spice on the Spice Market by Melanie Berg is the shawl. But we'll go over the other ones. And so anybody who doesn't know, I have a pegboard where I keep projects and things, odds and ends, my needles and that kind of stuff hanging up there. I think you can you see my, oh yeah, those are my earplugs right there for when I ride my motorcycle and stuff. But let's get out the big project for the year, which is my Stephen West Slipstravaganza blanket. Now, again, for those who haven't seen, everybody else has heard me say this a lot, but I basically made it a year-long project to make a full-size Slipstravaganza blanket. That blanket will be 86.5 inches in diameter when it's done. And I wanted one for my guest room. I wanted to make it for my guest room. And so I divided up the project over the 366 days of the year, and I have a little spreadsheet that lets me keep track of where I'm at and what I need to do to stay current. So I'm totally up to date on the blanket, and I am almost done with, I'm trying to remember what they call this section. let's see, triangles. It's called, this section is called triangles. Let me set this down. So I finished the checks section. I was almost done with it last time. And so that's completely done. That was section 5. And now these individual triangles, short row triangles, are section 4. Now these are interesting because you go and do each triangle over 15 stitches as a set of short rows. Let's see, you can see, should be able to see that pretty well. And so it goes from 15 stitches down to 1 stitch at the end. The real kicker here is that you attach and cut the yarn for each triangle because you have it separated by 3 stitches that you slip past between each triangle. So I'm adding, I think, is it how many of these triangles here? There's 46 triangles, so 90 ends to weave in. And it might have, and it's tricky because on that last, at the top of the triangle, of course, you're not going to be knitting anymore around that area, so I'd have to wait to weave it in when further rows happen and stuff. And yeah, so this is going to be a lot of weaving in, but this thing is getting huge. Let's see, and I've got 3 cords attached together here for these needles, and it's restricting the size of the blanket quite a bit. But I am so happy with how it looks. And I'm really excited. There's just the last section is I think it's chevrons. Yeah, the last section is called chevrons. And it will consume the last, from the end of July through the end of the year. So the last 5 months of the year is going to be nothing but doing these chevrons along the edge of this blanket. And I will do as many of those as the yarn allows. So I've calculated for doing 2 repeats of the chevron pattern, but depending on how much I have left over, I might consider adding more to the blanket just to try to use up as much of the yarn as I can. Now, speaking of yarn, this is all done with some yarn from a website called Finish Knits. And this is her Lankava, which comes in from Finland, and it's a 75 wool, 25% nylon, and it is reasonably priced. Budget price, kind of budget-minded pricing and stuff. It was affordable for the idea of using. I needed 16 skeins for this blanket, and so I got those. Now, I have something to follow up with later on about that, about blankets and doing projects year long, having thoughts about 2025. So I'll catch up with you on that later. But yeah, so if you've ever made this, I'd love to see your pictures of it. But yeah, it's been a fun knit. It's a little unwieldy and a little bit interesting to do for the summer to have a whole pile of blanket in my lap. And everything, but I'm super happy with how it's progressing. And I really enjoy working on it. And so here's this big pile of blanket. I've only got, I think, 7 triangles to go before I start the chevrons. And so that will be ready to go. Starting, I think it's on the 30th of July. 29th, I finish the triangles. And then it's on to the chevrons for the rest of the year. All right, so there's that. And then I didn't make a whole lot of progress on my Ilha sweater. And this is knit with some Bare Naked Wool's hemp shawl. And so let's see if you can see that. I'm really happy with that. I've got a couple more rows on it, but now I'm going to be focused on this a bit more now that the Anate is done and got the pair of socks done. This will be my primary sweater project at this point. You know, and let's see if I have it here somewhere. I was just reminded of something else, and I don't think I have it in reach anywhere here. Sorry about the hesitation. I'm just trying to think of where I had put that. I I don't think it's around. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I had gotten a new bag, a Gussie bag, and I'll put a link down below and I'll stick a picture in here. And I'm using it to hold the next sweater project that comes after this one. But sorry, that's an aside. But yeah, so this is a top-down sweater. I'm making it with this hemp shawl, which is hemp, I think some merino and some silk. And it's got some nice cables and some lace and everything up there. And so once I finish the yoke, it should be pretty straightforward. It's got a nice texture detail at the bottom and at the bottom of the sleeves. I think I'm going to make it long sleeved because I have enough yarn for that. But yeah, it's been a really nice yarn to knit with. It moves very nicely over the needles. And I'm looking forward to getting some more progress on the yoke. So I expect to have some more substantial progress on this next time. But I do highly recommend Bare Naked Wools. I really enjoy their yarns. Even though obviously I love bright colors, the natural, the kind of minimally processed yarns are really, really lovely to work with. All right, so, and you know what? I did not add, I thought I put it in here, but I have another project that I started, and this would be barely started. All right, so if you remember, let me at least go bring up my projects list because I'll see it there. Okay, so this is yarn pick number 17 for this year, and this is a good chunk of some, this is Molly Girl Diva in Pour Some Sugar on Me. Really beautiful blue, and I use this in a shawl that I'd made. And I wanted to make a pair of shorty socks, and I'll put in a picture. They're the Grinchia socks by Silky R. And as it turns out, you know, they see if they mark it this way. I think the pattern's actually in German, but she has a test knit going on for English. So I'm looking at her English instructions and I'm going to do these socks. Now, I didn't have, it would have definitely been a case of yarn chicken if I'd used what was left here to make the shorty socks. I have, it's a total of 248 yards of this. And I was concerned about running out because I really like the structure at the back of the sock. I think it looks interesting, and I wanted to make sure I didn't run out. I wanted to be able to do the whole thing. So I looked through my stash and I looked for some leftovers of yarn that have stellina in it. I don't know how obvious the little sparkles are there, but I wanted to find another yarn with stellina. Well, I found some yarn from Tink, and it was just a little leftover, about 30 yards in this Kush color. And again, this is another sparkly yarn. And I have started the toes. See if we can see that. The color is getting funny. Really pretty purple. So these blue socks are going to have purple toes. And that'll be fun. And that way I'll be able to do the entire sock. And I might save a little bit of this purple. They show in some of her patterns that people put a little single row of a contrast color on the back of the heel at the top. And I thought maybe I'll have enough to do that with. Just so you know, one of the ways I try to, when I use up yarn, particularly if I'm using it up between two, I have to make two of the same object, is you see I've started one toe. I'll actually be starting the second toe also on a separate set of socks. I don't mind knitting two at a time, but I don't like to knit two at a time on the same set of needles. I know a lot of folks do that and they're comfortable with that. I've tried it. I'm not crazy about it. And I also get this paranoia about how far apart the needles are being held going from one sock to the other. But yeah, that's just me. I just like working on them separately. That way I don't have any fiddliness with the stuff all on the same needles and that kind of thing. I'm lazy. And I don't like fiddly, figuring it out and that kind of stuff. I just want to be able to pick it up and go. And so I will be starting the second toe, and I will work them up in parallel until I've used as much of this yarn as possible. So it'll be interesting to see if it gets me to a complete toe on each sock, or if it does it all the just part of the way up. And I do, my preference is, you know, I used to always do Judy's Magic Cast On, and that does work great. But when the first time I tried the Turkish cast on for toe up socks, I just felt like it's like a magic trick. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about having enough yarn to finish your cast on, similar to a long tail cast on like with Judy's Magic Cast On. And so you can just start right where the yarn starts, and it's crazy. You wind yarn around the two needles, and it again comes across like, how does this actually work? But it works great, and you get the exact same results as you do with a Judy's Magic Cast On, and that is a very seamless, continuous kind of rounded edge there, which is really nice. And for just as an aside, I know a lot of socks will have you do make one left, make one right at the edges to make the toe, and that feels very tight to me sometimes, particularly on those early rows on a toe. And so again, making things easier, I simply do a yarn over one stitch before the end, you know, after within each side of the sock. I do a yarn over, and then on the next row, I turn that into a make one left or make one right. And I do promise one day to get to a video that talks about effectively the 4 ways to do almost the same structured increase, but different, where you're either picking up the leg between the crossbar between the stitches, whether you're using a shortened round yarn over, a regular yarn over, or actually throwing on the whole stitch onto the needle with a twist. And so all of those give you the same identical structure, just with a different amount of yarn slack there. And it's something to think about when you're doing particularly raglan increases. I was going to say, oh, I think I can grab it. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay. This, some people will recognize as my Ravello, and I'm really happy. I can't wait to start wearing this as a long sleeve and start wearing this when the weather gets a little cooler. On the Ravello, it's a design feature, but she does make one left and make one right on either side of a stitch. So you're pulling up that horizontal bar on each side of a stitch. Well, the result of that is you pull in yarn. It scavenges yarn from the stitch in between the two increases. And so you can see that here. Let me see if I can hold that up. You'll see there's these larger stitches, but that's because in between each large stitch, there's a stitch that's had a lot of its yarn pulled away by those increases. And so you get that look. Now, if you want something that doesn't look quite as extreme, you can do a reverse yarn over or a yarn over and twist it the direction you want it twisted and stuff. But it's all, I love the structure of things and kind of how they work and stuff. But yeah, this is still like, ooh, it's such a great, turned out so nice. You would think from all these sweaters I make, I must have a psychedelic wardrobe or something, but I do like the bright colors on the knits. They're so fun. All right, so that's that. So that is my barely started set of socks. And I think that's all the, so that's all the works in progress. So the next thing is acquisitions. And so I did get some acquisitions, and one we'll talk more about than others, but you know, I had been hearing a lot of talk about Andrea Mowry's The Shift. In fact, Jonathan Stay's podcast, he says he makes one of those, I think every year or something like that, makes it frequently. And so I got a little intrigued, and decided I wanted to try it, and I wanted to try it in the dyed in the wool yarn. So I went and found 3 colors of dyed in the wool that I think will go together nicely to make a shift. You can see that this yarn has some of the same teal in it as the other two, and you also see some pinks replicated here. And so my real challenge now is to figure out which colors I want to be A, B, and C. Now, not to disappoint you, but this is the Yarn Randomizer, so I've picked up these yarns and they're going into the pool in my closet, and they'll have to be randomly picked to get an opportunity to be worked. But I did want to have something that I could make a shift from that was very deliberate in his color choices, and I'm really happy with this. These colors are Stonetown, Vibe Check, and then this one is Dark Side. And so I think these will work out very well for a shift cowl. And so now, actually we'll get to yarn budget and that kind of stuff in a moment. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was I've been really enjoying making a blanket all year, just knitting, you know, the 540 stitches a day basically on the blanket and getting a result of a huge project done by the end of the year with that effort. Well, Stephen West recently came out with another blanket. I'll put in a picture, and it is called the Bubbly Blossoms blanket by Stephen West. Now that's another one that's going to take another 16 skeins of DK weight yarn, 100 gram DK weight yarn, and I decided that I've been enjoying this so much this year, I want to do it again next year, and I want to try it with this pattern. So I'm going to show you the colors I picked up to do this with. So I also got these from Finished Knits. Let's see if I can do a little peek. I always like to have some picture for the thumbnail that shows me peeking over something. But yeah, so I decided to get a couple of greens and a couple of kind of browns or cinnamony kind of colors. And I've got to figure out which one I want for what color in the blanket. But I picked up 4 of each of these. Now, we will talk about this a little bit on stash management, but that's it. And so I'm wondering, I know this is early, but I was thinking, I haven't done any knit-alongs before, but I was thinking I definitely want to turn this into a knit-along and keep my computer awake. Turn this into a knit-along for next year, for 2025. So it may be a little bit to wait, but it'll give people plenty of time to plan. So if you're interested in knitting the Bubbly Blossoms blanket along with me next year, I invite you to kind of plan it out. I will make a spreadsheet available for how much work needs to be done for every day of the year and stuff to finish the blanket in a course of a year. And so if you're interested, I invite you to join me. We'll figure out more details about that later, but I'm definitely on board with doing another one for next year. And I was really happy with the colors I could pick out from the Finished Knits website and stuff. I think they look very true to color based on what I saw online. So that's for next year. And that's not a random pick, that'll just be a background project that runs all year long. Now, so that's all the acquisitions. So now stash management. So with the finishing of this Anate and the finishing of the socks, I had 1,300 yards of yarn into my budget. Now, the 3 skeins of Spincycle add up to 600 yards. So if I multiply that by 2, that's 1,200. So I had enough to cover this purchase, bringing this yarn into my stash with what I'd used up. So I don't have to destash. I know you're probably disappointed. Now I hear you cry. It's kind of like, well, how does that work with the blanket yarn? Well, typically for projects where it's almost like a knit-along, like when I've done the annual shawl from Jimmy Bean's Wool, or done their craft bent and stuff like that, when I do those, that yarn never goes into my stash. It immediately comes in and gets used. And I kind of don't consider it the same way. Now this, of course, will be sitting till next year, but it will be something, it's a planned year-long project for 2025. And so I don't consider it in the same way that as if it were a permanent part of my stash. That might seem cheating, but my channel, my rules. And so I'm going to treat it that way. That is a dedicated yarn for something that will be happening in 2025. So I get that goes that's not going to count against me. So all right, and so that is the stash management. And so finally, yarn pick number 22. Now, one of the things I did want to talk about is, because so many sweater quantities of yarn have been picked by the Yarn Randomizer, I think I'm going to have to slow down the Yarn Randomizer and maybe just make one pick a month for the rest of the year, but we'll see how that goes. I could keep picking every episode, every 2 weeks. My rule is whatever is in my queue that hasn't been started at the end when it hits midnight on New Year's Eve gets pulled out of the queue and it goes back into my stash pool, and I start all over fresh. So it could be I'll keep doing that, and if stuff lingers and ends up not getting started, it just goes back into the pool. And that's what I've done every year with the randomizer. Generally, I don't have my queue has never been this long, and it has not been this long ever, I don't think. I've got at least 8 objects in my queue. Let's take a look. Is it 8? Yes, it is. It's 8. Now, one of them's a chicken, which I should start soon, because I have, I think, 2 more chickens to make for Christmas, trying to get ahead of the game there. But yeah, there are a lot of sweaters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sweaters still in the queue. Oh my goodness. If I got all those done this year, I think that'd be more than 10 sweaters this year, which is definitely a high watermark for me. But okay, getting back to away from the rambling and back to yarn pick number 22 for 2024, and it's this absolutely beautiful hypnotic yarn. They're Yarnable, so this is their monthly subscription, and she does just beautiful colorways, and so this is very beautiful. You see there's some tan and some speckles and some richer reds. It's very nicely, some tonality to it, as well as some contrasting colors in there. And so the colorway here is Apple Crisp. So the question was, what to do with this? Now, I don't know how much you've used Ravelry and recognize all the things you can do with it. There are some features in Ravelry that aren't obvious, that are really handy. And my son's tuned me into a tool for recording web sessions, like using a web page, that I think I want to try to take advantage of. But let me try to describe to you kind of what I did with this. Oh, we got a loud motorcycle coming by. There it goes. Get those every so often out here. So this, you can look up this yarn on Ravelry. And so when I look at it in my stash, so if I look at this yarn in my stash, let's see, do I have that up somewhere here? No. Okay, so if I look at my stash and look up the Apple Crisp, I'll put crisp, if I could spell. There we go. When you look at the entry, you will see if you've entered the colorway for your yarn, if you've linked the yarn to the yarn brand and you put in the colorway for it, that colorway is a link. If you press on that link for the colorway, you'll see the Apple Crisp yarn in everybody's stash. And I can see that here. Now, the thing you may not know is that once you're in this view, you can go up to the bar where it says projects and click on projects, and you can see all the projects that people have made with this color of yarn. And it's super handy to get a feel for how a variegated yarn in particular will look when it's knit up. So I will see about trying to get some little tips on using Ravelry things to show this kind of detail, because it's super handy for me to try to find a pattern. So what happened was I looked at this yarn and the socks that had been knit up with it. And the socks have pretty typical flashing and pooling going on with this colorway. And they look lovely and that kind of thing. But I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to, I wasn't kind of interested in having a pair of socks that ended up looking, I love this color, but didn't want the socks kind of looking, the way the socks turned out didn't do that much for me. And it varies a lot depending on the number of stitches and your tension, and you can actually see in there how different the socks can turn out based on people's patterns that they're using and stuff. But I started thinking that maybe what I want to do with this is kind of a one skein shawl. And so I looked around and I found, I was looking, and again, funny things in Ravelry, you can I list all the patterns that would fit this amount of yarn and fingering weight. And I sorted it by hot right now. Just curious what everybody's kind of gravitating towards. And I found a little pattern called My Little Lace Scarf by Lisa Haynes. And so I'll put in a picture of that. And so I thought I really liked the look of that scarf, and I think this yarn will work up in a very interesting way in that scarf, because that scarf's going to get wide and then come back, and I think this will be interesting in that, along with the really interesting looking pattern. I do like to knit lace. Although you haven't seen me knit a ton of lace things, I do enjoy knitting lace and stuff, and so it looked just like a fun, tidy little project for one skein of yarn. So this is project number 22. It'll be going into my queue, and it's going to become, now I will, subject to change, I can always change my mind, but right now I'm thinking that little scarf would be the right thing to do with this yarn. All right, so that's everything. I'm going 46 minutes. Let's see. I think the only other thing I wanted to say was that I actually have prepared to do, after a long hiatus, episode 2 of my sock retrospective. So I've got 10 pairs of socks lined up, and I'll be recording that and probably releasing it next Sunday in between episodes and get that out there as well. All right. So that's everything going on here. See, I'm trying to think, and that's it. Oh yeah, I did want to show, I didn't show this when I showed the sweater. This is all the yarn that's left from my Anna sweater. Just a little over 1 gram of 4 colors, and a little extra of this one because I only needed enough to finish the collar. So, but cool stuff. But okay. So otherwise, I hope you're enjoying your weather, enjoying what's going on, enjoying your friends and family, and taking care of yourself. And everything, and being kind and receiving kindness in turn. So, and above all else, I hope you are enjoying your knits.